What's up, everybody? This is Adam from Polyform Studio, and this is Product Lab, the show that explores the product strategies of startups through interviews, experiences, and stories with the founders.
Today, we are joined by Brad Becker, ex-Chief Design Officer of IBM Watson and the CEO of Sentient Play, who are exploring the future of digital experiences through emerging tech. So we have a ton of interesting AI topics and discussions coming up this episode, so stay tuned.
I'll make something up.
Damn, man, this is the show already.
Welcome.
We're going to get into it.
Let's go. All right.
Yeah, great to have you here, Brad. We're just going to dive right into it, man. Pleasure as always to have you on the show. Tell us about Sentient Play.
So I formed Sentient Play after leaving IBM Watson, where I was Chief Design Officer, running the team that was trying to figure out, while we had so many research folks and people trying to figure out what was possible, myself and my team were trying to figure out what was valuable and what was desirable. So a lot of technology. This isn't anything specific to Watson or AI or IBM or anything, but a lot of technology is about the art of the possible, but it's not necessarily about what, is really valuable to people or what's really needed. So it is cool that people are sort of exploring these continents, these planets, but it doesn't mean that all those planets are inhabitable, or that it's a great place to go build colonies or whatever, if you will, a silly metaphor, but that's a little bit of what we were trying to do. And while I was there, I noticed that whether you were talking to sort of the CEO of a company like Chase Manhattan or something, or whether it was a Girl Scout troop or whatever, people wanted to, they'd come into this room and there's this glass wall and there's all these shining lights going off into the darkness, and you could have a conversation with this AI, and the voice would come from the speakers and you would talk, and you would just talk. And so I noticed first how powerful that was and how effortless and comfortable it was for people. And then how people would ask silly questions, no matter who they were, about like, what's your favorite color, or, what are you, or whatever. And so it sort of crystallized for me that humans are just wired for conversation, storytelling, and play. And, play is how we learn, and storytelling is how we encode information and impart meaning and context and, time and space to things. And conversation is really how we sort of navigate between these things and how we decide what to do and all of that. So I thought those were really powerful things. And so we were looking at different types of what we were calling computational creativity, or sometimes generative or procedural types of creativity, design, whatever. And we were exploring some of that. But eventually I left to kind of focus full time on that idea of how is not just AI, but all of sort of cutting edge technology, not even cutting edge anymore, just emergent and still being explored. How can that contribute, to create magical experiences for people? Because I'd been doing user experience work for a few decades, and I'd been a developer and a designer and QA and product management. I'd kind of done all of it, but it was all centering around this, like, how do we make really great experiences for people, really great products for people? And so I just felt like we had gotten to do some of that work there, and I had a taste of doing that for real. Like I started a visioneering team that was kind of like prototyping things and trying things, and even building things that were fake, just showing what was possible. Like, you could quickly put together the experience and say,
Right.
This would be really valuable. Can we do this? And that's a nice way to frame the conversation, with something tangible, something that's sensory, and so that's what we're doing. I call it artifice and artificial intelligence, because, really, AI is good at certain types of things. People are good at other types of things, and algorithms are good at, other types of things. So it's a mix of, and a lot of entertainment that we enjoy is partly based on illusion, and so I like that idea of mixing those things and trying to come up with something special for people. That's the
Yeah,
backstory.
so
So,
cool.
Amazing.
also, I was bitten by a radioactive spider. So, yeah,
As you do. Yeah.
yeah. Origin
So,
story.
yeah, I love it, man. And, I think we first met when you were pretty early days into the sentient play journey, working on Comrade, which I believe was the first game, well awarded, super well received. You want to, illuminate the audience a little bit into the catalog of experiences you guys have produced now, and maybe what's coming down the pipe, if you can talk about that yet. Maybe it's a secret still.
Yeah. Um, there's a few things that we worked on, and it did start with Comrade. Comrade was maybe not the very first thing that I did. I think I started off a lot more sort of propeller headed in what we were doing and a little less focused on experiences. And I was looking at training AI and some of those things and dealing with data sets and whatever. But I was pitching to a VC, and I was talking about some of these ideas of these tools and platform stuff that we could build to make AI better and easier to create, et cetera. And then I mentioned that I was, kind of putting all that stuff through a prototype of this game called Comrade that was a Cold War game. It was like, basically the Cold War never ended. And of course, this is way before Russia invaded Ukraine and, all that kind of stuff. So this is what it was just like, fun theoretical stuff, not like
Yeah.
missiles, launching. But the story was sort of a reverse war games where there's a Soviet AI from 1985 and it's been in a bunker and it was abandoned during Glasnost and the fall of the Soviet Union. And you're the first person to get back in to be contacted with this AI. And the stakes are kind of high because the AI still holds the launch codes, to the nuclear arsenal. And the funny thing about that is as I put all these, I did a fair amount of research, but later you find things that you just didn't discover initially. And later I found that there were these sort of computer systems, and they weren't really AI systems, but they're called dead hand systems. And the idea is that I have a weapon in my dead hand. Even after you kill me, I can still kill you back. And so part of the Cold War was like, creating these systems where, like, if we get nuked, this system will automatically launch stuff, even if nobody's alive. And so it's really crazy. You start off with something that you think is kind of funny, a funny exaggeration, and you're just looking for plausibility and all of that. And it turns out, no, people really kind of think that way. And that's all. There really is a monster hiding under your bed and whatever. So we had fun doing that. But in the pitch for the VC meeting, they didn't want to talk about the tooling and the platform stuff at all. They were like, tell me about the game. I love the Cold War, whatever. And so I was like, that's interesting. And I was also doing the game because it was an experiment to see, when IBM was working on Watson was used by, like cancer clinics and 3-letter agencies from around the world and like all these like sort of expensive or elite or whatever things. And I just thought, what if you put AI into the hands of everybody? And so Comrade was partly a test to say, what would it be like if you had an AI personal assistant, and that's sort of like one of the endings of the game. It's your AI sidekick, if you will.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to put people in different situations and just say, would the average person let an AI just go wild on the internet, basically train itself on the whole entire corpus of the internet, with all the problems that could be part of that? If you would you let it, would you let the genie out of the bottle as well? Would you just, would you let an AI, modify its own training and its own code? And just like, what do people think about AI and how would, what's the people side of all of that? And so I put all that into the game as different choices that people would make and made it entertaining. But anyway, I ended up making a game, and then we were at Apple launch partner for the Apple Watch. And so we made a game, and this is in 2016, I think. We made a game that was like pretty much 100% text. And
Yeah.
that would have worked for 1979, 1980, maybe 81,
Yeah.
Infocom and
Yeah.
adventure. But to do that in 2016, I don't know, we've probably had maybe 80,000 people or so buy the game and play it. And it would work on the Apple Watch. You could play the whole game on the watch. It would, the comrade and these other folks would be texting you. So we were experimenting with messaging-based games and
Yeah.
terminal emulators and using weird things that people didn't normally think of as games, and doing a game for wearables. And it was fun. It was fun. It was interesting. It was like an experiment with an experiment, you know.
Yeah.
No kidding. And it seems
So
like a lot of what you were describing earlier, Brad, with like your experience with bringing people in to try out like the IBM Watson and have these like conversations, was that like a huge influencer for like Comrade being this like conversational based back and forth as well? Or did it just kind of happen that way?
absolutely. It's a couple things. It was taking the visioneering approach of like, okay, what if we sort of make the clay model of all of this? What if
Yeah.
we storyboard all this stuff before we build the tech? As opposed to the other way, like I built this thing. It's like nuclear, it's nuclear fission. What should we do with it? The opposite is more like, what do we want to do? And then is that possible? So it was some of that. And then it was mixed with just the human side. So the technology was changing fast, and now it's probably changing even faster. Um, and the technology is changing a lot, but the human side of it seems to be pretty timeless. Like
Yeah.
people, conversation, storytelling, and play, all of that. And so, there's a sort of societal change management that you have to do, or you get, the French Revolution, right? Like heads rolling in the streets or whatever. Like when
Yeah.
you want to change the world, whether it's technology or politics or social mores or whatever, I think, you know, civilizations would be well served by doing intentional change management on all that stuff. Like, how do we
Yeah.
bring people along instead of just, hitting people over the head or just dumping random crap on people and like doing a massive experiment on society like social media was, it's crazy stuff. What us modern folk have to deal with, these kind of fundamental changes and what the kids deal with, whatever. So I just thought, let's make a game. Let's make it really fun. Let's make it entertaining. But let's also kind of learn about ourselves through play, because I think that's what play is all about, is learning. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was a great experiment. I remember getting, it was like, I don't know if it was the first Apple Watch, but it was one of the first generations for sure. And
Yeah.
that being just like such an interesting experience on the watch, because everything was like so limited at the time. People didn't really know what to do in terms of like an interface or UI or
Yeah.
anything. And Comrade was just this kind of neat little game you could play on your wrist. And
Yeah.
the storytelling was super interesting. I love too how you're like, really reduce it down to this idea of this like conversation, storytelling, and play. I look at like what's going on with consumer accessible AI right now, things like ChatGPT and Midjourney, and it's like that's exactly what's happening, right? It's this conversational interface where I'm
Absolutely.
using natural language to make my queries or whatever. Storytelling is often what the output is, whether it's an image in something like Midjourney, or stories or marketing speak coming out of ChatGPT. And the play is like, I think why it's taking off so much is because like my mother can hear about ChatGPT on CNN or something, and load it up and
Yeah.
go in there and play around and actually get some type of results that she's blown away by.
Right.
Where do you see the future of all this going, as somebody who's had, you've had your finger on the pulse of it for quite some time? I'm sure this in some ways was a natural evolution you saw coming, but maybe also a
Yeah.
surprise even to the experts.
Well, I think, what's challenging about AI, and I'm not the one to invent this, but the growth of AI and a lot of technologies is nonlinear, and humans are pretty linear. And
Right.
we have
Yeah.
a pretty limited, like when you think about sort of like magnitude of scale for different things like time, space, whatever. Humans have like this limited range that we perceive and that we live in, right? Like we see colors in this band of the, spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
We experience time. If things don't happen like in seconds or minutes, we kind of don't see it. Like things that take too long, things that are too fast, we don't perceive them. Um, and so the other thing is that we're really not good with nonlinear things. We're made for things like the arc. When I say non-linear, I'm talking about like excessively exponential things, like
Right.
sort of AI with AI. And so if you throw a ball and it arcs and the area under the curve is, calculus and it's variable and whatever, that's not what I'm talking about. But something that is like, 1.0001, 1.001, 1 point, people are like, they're zoned out. They're like, it's not moving. And then it's the hockey stick,
Yeah, right.
all of a sudden. So there was a chart that I saw before where they were like, we like to think of it as like, AI is going to be like the intelligence of dirt, and then it's like the intelligence of a plant, and then it's like the intelligence of an insect, and then it's like the intelligence of a bigger insect, and then it's like and that's not it at all. Like the way that it works is it's like 0, 0, 0, 0, infinitesimally small, and then it's like chimpanzee, human, God. That was like the chart that they showed, right? Like they were like, that's the kind of dominating thing. And part of the reason for that was it became obvious that if you have a lot of compute, if you have a lot of storage, memory, computational capacity, whether it's GPUs or specialized CPUs or whatever, and let's just say you're not constrained on power and compute and all these things, right? Then you have sort of an army approach, and it's basically turtles all the way down. It's AI all the way down. It's kind of like we have an AI who's going to clean up the corpus. Well, another AI that's specialized in cleaning up corpuses. And then who's going to verify that? Well, then another AI. And so, like, GANs work this way where they have the adversarial network. And,
That's right.
you have an AI operating as a critic and another AI operating as an artist and another one. And so you can just keep piling up sort of, not infinite, but like highly scalable things in every dimension, and it's AI all the way down. And then that multiplier, if you can even get to the point where the AI is 1.01% better than a human, but you can multiply them infinitely and multiply them by each other, where the critic makes it 10% better and the generative part is 10% better and all of that, then you can get something that, again, that is exponential, or logarithmic or whatever. And so it's a really wonderful thing. It's also a really terrible thing for the same reason that, like, it's a giant experiment that we're sort of unleashing. I saw that OpenAI recently said that ChatGPT should be regulated, was their position on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is just that we're much better at like opening Pandora's box than we are at figuring out what's going to happen when we open Pandora's box. We're terrible at that.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have predicted what cell phones would have done to the world, all the weird ways that things have changed, right? Or even that people would take something that was called a phone and mostly use it for messaging, typing. Like,
Right.
I'm going to give you a telephone, and somebody just picked up the old telephone and just started just endlessly punching the buttons instead of talking to somebody. You'd have said, in the 70s or 80s, you would have said, that's bizarre. Nobody wanted
Right.
to push in all the numbers and do things, but people started doing that right away. So
Exactly.
AI, much more so, especially the more that we connect AI to other things that could have consequences as well.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you bring up like a really good point there about like humans' ability to see things linearly, but that exponential change of like
yes,
smartphones is like unpredictable.
Absolutely.
yeah,
And, we're in another situation like that again and now,
yeah,
which is exciting and scary,
Mm-hmm.
but I think lots of opportunity. I mean, we were
yeah,
talking earlier today about like, um, you know, you're doing all these cool things with AI and gaming, and I'm seeing people out there making game assets using Midjourney and stuff like
True.
this, using all types of other AI programs for creating like scenes and environments in Unreal and stuff like this. And then we got thinking like, man, like how long is it going to be before startups and making apps and stuff is a thing of the past, and anybody can just make a piece of software using like a mashup of different AI tools. And
Right.
as somebody in the gaming space, how soon, how far out do you think we are from being able to just like go into the holodeck and like make your own kind of game, generatively using a mashup of these kind of tools?
Yeah. Well, I do know there's something that I did not learn um, in the tech industry that I learned later by tricking myself into forming an actual game studio. But and that's that uh, there's a phrase that people say that people will optimize the fun out of any game. So if you give
Yeah.
them a game, which is an entertaining challenge, right?
Yeah.
A series of interesting choices. There's other ways that people describe this, but if you give somebody a game and they can break that game and kind of ruin it for themselves, they probably will. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something that game designers, people who really focus on the mechanics of the game and the systems of the game and the economies of games, etc., learned a long time ago is that people will ruin their own fun relentlessly. And so there's the technical side of it that we could talk about. Like, do we have foveated, stuff in VR and how many degrees of freedom and, what's the resolution of the human eye and how many colors can we see? Like humans can see more shades of green than we can red or blue because something was probably going to kill us in the trees more likely than in the sky, right?
That's
Yes,
right.
exactly.
So there's all those. There's the human factor side, but then there's just the human behavior side of it. Like, so if you're saying how long until we could have, sort of mixed reality and maybe even ambient mixed reality where it's location based and just around us. There's a little bit of that right now. Like you've sat in the chairs before and stuff. Like I did
Mm-hmm.
a talk at Sundance a few years back, and a guy Jeffrey, gosh, I don't know his last name right now. I'd have to look it up. But they have these chairs that you can sit in and do VR stuff, and it like if you do a rotation while the visuals go up or down, people feel like they're going up or down. You can fake people by
Mm.
spinning them.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is with your ear, it does the same thing. You don't actually have to move them up or down. So you can have chairs that
Mm.
tilt and move and whatever. Put on the VR headset, and people really feel like they're now. It's not the holodeck as far as tactile and as far as some of those things, which we haven't figured
Of
out yet.
course.
But the experience, you can get pretty darn close right now to have a really transformative experience. Um, but to make it fun, that was the point I wanted to make. To actually make it fun for a broad class of people and have the right level of challenge without frustrating. The state of flow, like as a designer, right? Well, in
Oh
games,
yeah.
Yes.
you're essentially trying to induce, not all games, but to some extent, you're trying to induce a state of flow in
Mm-hmm.
other people, and you're trying to get them in the right area between sort of boredom and understimulation and frustration and overstimulation, and kind of keep them there, and then kind of vary it. And so yeah, that part, would be interesting, but maybe we have. So what we had pitched eventually to some people, we were talking to different companies who were making things, and we were pitching a sort of AI, a storyteller AI that could take
Mm-hmm.
data and sort of turn it into stories, look for the patterns behind it, do a little
Right.
bit of basic data science, and then look at data through the eyes of humans and how people think about it, and then tell a story about it. Right now, there's
Mm-hmm.
startups doing that exact thing right now. They weren't. I don't think they're really doing it for games, but they're doing it in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also had what we called a director or like a dungeon master AI. And this is the idea was to have algorithms and AI and use a few tricks and stuff that about human nature, and basically try to do that where you're kind of number one, you're kind of keeping people in there, but also you're trying to kind of like oscillate the challenge so that there's like time to breathe and there's excitement, like pacing in a movie where you have an
Right.
action
Course.
scene and then you have a quiet scene where everybody collects their thoughts and your brain has time to process. And so that director you have an AI director. Again, it's AI all the way down, right? You have one that's good at turning data into stories. You have another one that's good at like directing the action and like changing what's happening. And so I think to your point, Adam, I think this is coming is just a bunch of different specialized AI, and the economics of all this is going to be really interesting, because if it's like pennies, then it's going to be one of these crazy experiments. If it's something where, it's just rich people and corporations getting richer, and it's really expensive for everybody else, that's another possibility.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. And then if there's human in the loop, man in the middle stuff, like if you read The Diamond Age a long time ago, like people talk about Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson,
Oh yeah.
which I read because I'm old, I read when it came out. And then, but his second book was called The Diamond Age. And I thought it was really interesting because then he got into nanotechnology, and then he got into the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer. And that was one of our inspirations when we were doing this. And Amazon, when they were doing the Kindle, they actually named it Fiona after the girl in the story was the code name. I think that's the right name. And so when they were thinking about the Kindle and having a digital book kind of thing, they were borrowing from that. And that was our second thing after Comrade, is we basically were working on a digital book that came to life, or a book inside of a video game that came to life and would write the story on the fly for you. And I was working with some other engineers and researchers and stuff who had been working on parts of that, and that kind of like dynamic adaptive storytelling where you do something, and it goes back to the campfire. Like when humans first were telling stories, they're doing it in person, and they're watching, let's say it's kids, they're watching that the kids are getting too scared, or that the kids are getting bored, and then they like skip ahead, or they, hype up the action more. And so that personalization at scale is something that Sentient Play has been thinking about for 7 years and doing experiments on. All of those things, yeah.
It's like, how can we take this experience and ensure that everybody has a unique instance of that when they do it, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it might not be unique. Like you and I and Adam, maybe we like the same thing, and
exactly,
the same kind of music and whatever, and the same thing would work for us. But there's a lot of people who, for various reasons, there's something they don't like, or they're coming from a different place or whatever, and to be able to adapt things on the fly to whatever you need is potentially cool and powerful. That's the nuclear power instead of the nuclear bomb side of all of this.
Yeah, man. I'm a big well, Mike and I both are big kind of battle royale shooter type guys. So when you get matched in the right lobby, and it's like, it's a good fight, but you still have a chance of winning, and you're just in the zone. It's such a good feeling. And I mean, what you're describing, we're all gamers here, it's like you're describing the best of games, where it's like, it's hard, but it's not too hard. What was that recent Elden Ring I was playing last year, and it was just so punishing, and I hadn't played any of the other Dark Souls games, so I just got my ass whooped. And at one point I was like, this isn't fucking fun anymore, and just kind of like put it down and went back to Fortnite.
That's right.
But
I had a similar experience. I think Elden Ring was a brilliant game, and it was really wacky, and it wasn't afraid to be whatever the hell it wanted to be. It was kind of like the kid that just wears like suspenders and paisley pants and whatever, and the parents were like, all right, you do you. That was Elden Ring. It was a really odd, weird game, and they did a lot of interesting things in it, and so it had a ton of personality. But the From Software that makes those, they their games are what they call punishing. So that's not Sentient Play, but I mean, there's a room for that in the world. There's a lot of people out there that are they literally they're like, give me the hardest thing, and I'm going to prove to the world how good I am.
That's it. Yeah. Let me do this thing 100 times, and now I know how to do it, moving forward. Yeah. It only took 100 times, though, right? Yeah. Me playing that.
And that reward, too, that reward cycle
so sweet.
Is so nice, right? When you finally beat that boss after 100 tries, you jump
nothing
up.
More satisfying.
And Yeah, these, I think, to your point, are like the human touches and the finessing of the game designers that it's going to take a while to, or a really good director AI to sort out. But
Well, yeah, and I think the creation reflects its maker to some extent. I think it needs to. Like
Yeah.
humans look for the human fingerprint in things. So like let's say you're watching a movie like Fantastic Mr. Fox, right?
Mhm.
And it's like it's stop motion puppets and whatever. That could be terrible. I mean, it's a lot of work to do stop motion, but it also is kind of hard to make something that's cool. And like Nightmare Before Christmas was really interesting, and there's a lot of that stuff there. And Fantastic Mr. Fox is a great movie and has a lot of heart and interesting characters and whatever.
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of human touches all over that, and even though it's an animated movie and even though it's puppets, it feels very human because so much of
Yes.
both Wes Anderson and the actors and all the people who worked on the film, there's a lot of humanity in that. And so I think for entertainment and for storytelling and even for art in Midjourney, people are responding. It's a cheat code because we found a way to copy and compress human talent, and that's the
Mhm.
thing that I think maybe isn't coming out. I think that's kind of the crux of the issue. Is it's not like an AI learned how to paint, but it's found a way to record and compress a lot of human talent and then reproduce some of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new form of recording, and that's not maybe the best analogy, but it's probably closer than what people are actually thinking in their head. That
Yeah.
Midjourney is thinking, or some of these ways that we
Exactly.
like to think about it. It's like, no, it's closer to like a zip file that has the ability to munch things together. Um, and so it is weird though if you're one of the people like they found where they could use a certain prompt and they could get a source image that had been scraped out of it. I'm sure you've seen some of that stuff, like photos of people or paintings or whatever. Like if you put in just the right prompt, it'll basically vomit back the original
Exactly.
artwork, which is
Yeah.
really problematic in court. But um,
Yeah, we'll
but
see. I
it's
think
yeah.
they're going there soon. Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
this is so crazy. So, Brad, do you think like the future of these tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney is going to be like more of that human element? Like what you were describing, like making it more like I'm
Yeah.
communicating with somebody, or like what is like the future of these tools, the consumer ones look like?
Yeah, well, one of the questions, not to be cynical, but who has the money? Is it still
Right.
people that have the money? And corporations aren't really people, but they're driven a lot by their investors, their partners, limited partners, and
Yeah.
whatever, the board. So right now, it's people that design things traditionally and historically. People design
Right.
things to be purchased by people and used by other people, or maybe the same person. And so it used to be people all the way down, right? People making stuff, people buying stuff, people using stuff. And if you insert tools in, it was still really about people. The tools were a multiplicative effect or something. If you had a steam shovel, you could dig a lot further, but you were digging for somebody who was paying you to dig, right?
Gotcha.
And as long as we don't as long as it's not like really AI all the way down, like if we put AI in charge of all the money and AI were purchasing things from other AI and whatever, I'm not going to say it's Skynet, but it certainly
Yeah.
changes the formula a lot. But as
Hmm.
long as we're like Midjourney right now, the output of that can be used by another AI, but mostly the output of that is being consumed by humans still.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
we're the arbiters of what's good and bad. And I spent maybe after the first 3 hours with Midjourney, I think it was Midjourney, I was like, subconsciously, I could start to tell if something had come from Midjourney, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit of the uncanny valley. Like, especially you look at the fingers and the eyes, and those
Yeah.
usually are wrong. And it's not so much. I think that fingers and eyes are so bad in Midjourney. It's partly goes back to humans again.
Oh
In the
yeah.
wild, we look for people's eyes. We look for prey's eyes because if the prey was looking at us, they saw us. If the
Mhm.
predator was looking at us, we were in trouble, right? Like eyes and then fingers and hands and claws. Those were the main implements of mass destruction back then. So it's just like humans are wired. Like, you can tell where somebody, like from, I forget what the range is, like across a pretty big room, you can tell within 15 degrees where anybody else in the room is looking.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you can,
Yeah.
that's how humans are wired. You can look across the room, see somebody's eyes, and you can tell within 15 degrees where they're looking. We're really good at that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And
I
so
remember
sometimes
in
AI is bad at something because it's just that humans are really
We're
good at
just
that thing.
so good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I think the human element will come through because we like that. We like nature, but we
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like nature better when we see patterns in it. That we tend to see patterns as beautiful, you know.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those like Gestalt theory and some of those design things about having different scales in the same photo or in an image, having different contrasting scales, having things that are similar be similar. There's all these kind of like art theory and design theory, and humans like that stuff. So I think AI will get better at that, but I think they're kind of just holding up a mirror to us a little bit and
Yeah.
reflecting back stuff that we've done back to us, just faster and at scale, and they
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
could personalize it at scale too.
Damn. It's like the human element will be a bigger factor in the future because that's what we respond most positively
Yeah.
to.
That's
So
right.
inevitably, we're like influencing it just
Yeah.
on how we're responding, right, to what it
Yeah.
generates.
Yeah.
I feel like you said the same. You said something about, after using Midjourney for so long, I was able to see compositions that had been created using Midjourney. And I feel like we're almost I feel like we are at that point with Chat GPT now. Where like, somebody even like internally will like send you something and you're like, oh, wait a second. I have a feeling you didn't write this. It's almost, there's like a certain way, right, that
Yeah.
the outputs are generated from ChatGPT, and you can really start to spot these things over
Yeah.
and over again.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you've heard of choir, right? So if
choir.
I sing a song and then BB King sings the song and then Bono from U2 sings the song, to the average human, it sounds very different. Now,
Totally.
mathematically, it might be somewhat similar, like depending on if you're looking at Fourier transforms or, however you want to analyze it, maybe it's pretty similar. But again, humans are adapted such that it's very important, like even to a baby, to be able to distinguish between voices, friend, foe,
Right.
stranger, you know, and we're really good at that. But when you have a choir where there's like 30 people together, a lot of choirs sound the same because we
Yeah.
can't, the same trick doesn't work when you have a bunch of people. And the AI stuff, when it's jamming together all this human stuff together, it starts to get its own flavor that's distinct as well. So I don't know. Yeah.
Super interesting. 40 minutes in.
Yeah. We hit with some lightning round. We got a bunch of
Let's get
quick
into the
questions
fast ones
we
here.
like to
Let's do
rip
it.
through.
Okay, so this one we kind of touched on a little bit here, but like super fast. The future of consumer AI tech. What does it look like?
Personalization at scale. I think
Personalization.
what people want is they want their stuff. So what if I have my personal AI, my comrade, if you will, and you have yours, and they're better at communicating with each other and faster than even we are, and they facilitate that. That could be interesting. What if you speak a different language, you speak Japanese, and our AI can talk together and help us arrange things or whatever? So I think there's and then also I own that AI or I paid for it or whatever, and I trust it. The trust is with me, and its first priority is to me, like in the movie Her or whatever.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
assuming that, like if we can have like sort of regulatory and financial and social societal influences that say, hey, an AI is like a wallet, like don't touch it, don't mess with it. It's not like on the phone where they'll turn on the microphone and record you and track all your stuff. Like if you think about all the privacy laws and all that on AI, and that AI is just your own personal psychic, your own what's it in Iron Man, Jarvis.
Sure.
Like
Jarvis. Yeah. Yeah.
if it's the thing that that's what people want, right? And
For
I think
sure.
that would be cool.
Jarvis, future of consumer AI.
I'm here for it. If we lived in
Yeah.
a world like her, I think we'd get a lot more done. I also fear of the AIs getting together and leaving like they did in her, right? All
Yeah.
the assistants kind of took
Spoiler
off.
alert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So next one, let's talk about let's talk about the biggest disruption coming in where sentient play exists, which is gaming right now. Biggest disruption that you see.
Biggest disruption that I see in gaming. Again, I'd have to say, and I haven't seen it happen yet, but if AI can do personalization at scale, like we were talking about,
Yeah.
where there's adaptive play, adaptive storytelling, moderation, you can imagine that AI could take stories further, and that people would create worlds and then turn people loose in them with AI and act it out like almost like well, there's not a great example of that, I think. You might think about Westworld or Dream Park or some of those
Yeah.
old stories, but it's kind of like somebody gets murdered in all of those, and I don't think there has to be anybody getting murdered. Um, but yeah, Dream Park's a fun book. It's actually, I think, a human murders somebody, not AI. So that's a switch. But yeah, I think personalization at scale, and then the ability to facilitate collaboration to make it easier for people to play together or to do things. There's a lot of work that people have done for, whether it's for people who are autistic or people who are on the spectrum or people who have different kind of neurodivergence, and they can use games to break through things. People use
Yes.
games to get over fear of heights, acrophobia, and things like that. So I think there's a lot that we could do with AI in games where there's benefit to it. It's sort of like vitamin infused play instead of just like learning how to shoot other people in the face better. Like, I don't know. Maybe we're all good enough at that already. But it would be cool if your AI was sort of helping you to get mental exercise or psychological improvement while you were playing games and through play. Because play is how we are wired to learn anyway.
Definitely. Play, like you said, play, conversational, and storytelling, right? Those are like the biggest
Yeah.
biggest learning opportunities. Let's take it back to you for a second, Brad. Let's talk what are your top 3 SaaS tools right now? Like for productivity, for like getting things done, or like just to be able to like function with the level of responsibility. What are you going to? What's your go-to?
So I'm still using the Google Suite some, and it is, not to be, I don't like to be super critical of the designers, but it's pretty mediocre. But you can collaborate. You are online, and you can get to it from multiple devices, and you can work collaboratively with people, and so that's where like Office originally missed the boat, is being online, being able to do collaboration. And that feature was so important, and I kind of feel like that's the whole future of the human race. If we don't get back to collaborating, we're in big trouble. So that's what I like about that. And then I switch up my tools a lot. I've been doing a lot of work in Unity. I used to work in Flash a lot back in the day, and Flash was janky as hell, but like it let you do things, in very messy ways, and mixing coding and visual stuff and everything together. And I've always been drawn to the intersection of, writing and music and audio and animation and graphics and programming. And when that stuff all comes together, you can do really cool experiences. So I've been playing with Unity. It's not beautiful out of the box like Unreal is, but it's very, very flexible and, good for, sort of composing and throwing things together and experimenting with that. So that's not really a SaaS tool, though, although I think it could be more than it is right now. Version control. I'm using a lot of version control, which is like GitHub or Plastic or, Perforce or whatever, because the ability to experiment and be able to revert back to what you had before. Like you think about before we had the undo. I remember being a kid and using an early word processor on the Commodore 64, and I was up all night working on the paper or I was up till late for me for a little kid or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I hit the wrong keystroke and it wiped everything and it was
Oh,
gone. And there
oh,
There
were no
is no.
automatic saves back then. There was no whatever. Like I'd saved, like deleted everything, and the whole paper was gone. And so you think about life before undo and before some of that, and the ability to version control things is really powerful for people who are doing creative things. So
Okay.
yeah, that's a great list. What one more list question? Just because you mentioned Snow Crash and his earlier book there,
Yeah.
what are some of the inspirational books that you think people should get into for a glimpse of what's to come in the future? Maybe.
well, I mentioned two of them, and I don't know how good they are as books, as like literature, like James Joyce or something, but
Right.
um, they're really interesting and get your brain going. I would definitely recommend Diamond Age. Like, Snow Crash was interesting, but Diamond Age was much, much more interesting, I felt like. Um, and the idea of reactives, where it's a combination of both the things in there. He's combining man in the middle, like human in the loop, humans and AI together making either live experiences like reactives were like TV shows with live actors and AI and stuff being generated, and the audience would be able to from their device sort of influence the show. There were a lot of really interesting ideas that still haven't really happened, and the Young Ladies Illustrated primer is in there, and it's a very interesting idea too. And I won't spoil it for people, but that one I highly recommend. And then Dream Park was interesting more from like the metaverse kind of side of things, the experiential reality. And it's kind of like there are sort of dungeon masters in this dream park, and it's sort of like a VR Disney World thing. And this is an old book. This is like late 80s. And somebody has to go in and they're doing like LARPing. They're doing like, like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of campaign.
Yeah.
And, but they're acting it out, and it's sort of like the hollow deck kind of thing that you were talking about, Adam. And it's
Right.
kind of like, but they're going all over, and they can like get in a boat, or they could do this, and they're actually traversing some grounds as well. So you don't have to worry about that aspect of it or the locomotion part of it. And instead, it's sort of like holographic projections that look pretty real. And so that's their sort of like, instead of it being a deck, it's like a whole hollow park or whatever. So Dream
Right.
Park is an interesting one to think through, some of that stuff. And at the end of the day, when we get to those things, we might not actually want any of that. It sounds good on paper, but it's really good as a, like to kind of like really skate to where the puck might want to go
Yeah.
eventually, and
Right.
think through what the ultimate would be. Those two are really interesting ones.
Awesome. Great recommendations. Yeah.
This is not a rapid fire question, but I just have like another question that I want to ask about like the whole IBM Watson thing and like getting people to come in and have like a conversation kind of like behind this
Yeah.
like glass door or something like that. It makes me think of, obviously, do androids dream of electric sheep, right? Or like the Alan Turing test, or what did they, it was like the Voight
Yeah.
comp machine, right? Where they were able to like vet whether someone was like an android or not. Was there ever anything like that that you saw where like people thought for sure that they were it was like a real person behind like the glass and they weren't able to tell, or were they like prefaced before that they were like, you're about to speak to?
Yeah. I mean, you could just walk off the street and get in there. Later at IBM's New York headquarters, they had a sort of some exhibits downstairs that might have been easier, and they bring people through. Um, you see that kind of stuff like at Epcot and whatever. And I remember being a kid, and the first time I saw an automatic, a sort of a solid state tic tac toe machine that could play you with tic tac toe.
Yeah.
And if you knew what you're doing, it wouldn't win, but it would never lose, because tic tac toe is a crappy game. But
Yeah.
um, and people are like looking, for who's controlling it. I
Mhm.
think
Right.
that
Right.
yeah, and then people get used to it. We get used to stuff after a while, and then we don't look for the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of
Exactly.
Oz,
Yeah,
But
the Oz example.
um, the and then the whole like the original Mechanical Turk really was a little person inside who was a chess master who was like pulling the levers and actually playing people at chess and beating kings and shahs and whatever at chess back then. But so it works both ways, but then they were right that it was not the machine. It was not actually a mechanical Turk that was beating people at chess. But there's been other experiments that people have done with automatons. They were pretty interested in that. We're talking 150 years ago or whatever. So some of these ideas are not. Isaac Asimov formulated the laws of robotics, which are really
Yeah.
laws of AI, in the
Okay.
30s. In the 1930s,
Yeah, right.
that was almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's crazy to think about it like that. Yeah, I remember those books, Foundations, and some of the other ones where
yeah,
they go deep on that. And it's,
yeah,
yeah, to think about that was 100 years ago. This is like, the automobile's a new thing, or, it's like pretty
yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
Um,
But
I'm
we're
not up.
past it. No, go ahead.
Huge.
I was just gonna say I'm not up on my sci-fi of today, but there could be somebody out there, making predictions for 100 years from now that are fairly accurate or
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we were promised
Fascinating.
jetpacks. I still haven't seen that. I do think the
Yeah.
day I got my jetpack, I probably would have accidentally killed myself with it. So,
For
like every kid
sure.
wants a
Yeah.
lightsaber and a jetpack, right? And it's like,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
Yeah.
that would be
The
bad.
reality.
The
Yeah.
dangerous
That's right.
Yeah,
toys. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like a really realistic jetpack simulator is going to come long before the actual jetpack.
yeah, that'd be
But
good.
yeah, I
That'd
was
be
talking to
much fun.
somebody on the weekend about making like an adult jolly jumper for VR so that I
That's
could
great.
do like snowboarding in VR. And like when I hit a jump, it lifts me off the ground for a little while or something like that.
Yeah, that's
And that
great.
would be, yeah, get my rocket pack simulator on that thing.
hmm
Yeah.
Amazing.
Don't forget the trick that if you rotate somebody, you can make them think they're going up or down.
Yeah, well, I will never forget that now. I didn't know that, but I'm gonna keep my eyes peeled for people triggering me that way. Uh,
Amazing. The same inner ear trick. It'll work.
yeah,
People are
yeah.
so primitive. It's
I think
wild.
that's pretty much it. I think, yeah, we went through the rapid fire. Brad, pleasure to have you, man. Really
Hey,
appreciate the
thanks for having
time.
me. Even though
Of
nothing with
course.
me turns out to be rapid fire, really.
It,
Yeah, it's just interesting stuff, man. It's all rabbit holes, right? We got to
that's
go
it.
down them and had some really interesting conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Would love to have
Thanks
you
for
again
having
sometime.
Oh, it
All
was
right.
so
That
fun.
was great.
Thank you, Brad.
Great chatting with you guys.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're tuning in from. And while you're at it, drop us a like. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Product Lab.